And welcome to the Triple Crown wrap-up edition of And They're Off. Before we get to all of that, Steve Haskin, we just saw Frankel run in the Queen Anne Stakes at Royal Ascot. Looks like he may be a good one.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, it seems to be the universal opinion about it from everyone there that this was his greatest performance ever. It's hard to believe that, you know, his was a straight mile over ground considered good to soft, and he still wins by 11 lengths. So, I mean, granted, he wasn't beating much. Celebration, the runner-up, was the same horse he's beaten all the time, but just watching him just shove him completely out of the way, actually drift across the course. He wound up on the outside rail. But, I mean, to draw off the way he did by 11 lengths, the horse is just getting better and better. And I think the most important part, we all know how brilliant he is, but for him to relax and just settle behind horses the way he did bodes very well for when they do stretch him out to 1.25 miles in the Juddmonte International. But this horse is a total freak.
Yeah.
And to be named Frankel just makes it all the more fascinating.
Yeah, congratulations to Juddmonte, who, of course, had a long and prosperous relationship with Bobby Frankel. Steve, on our last show, we were gushing about how there is nothing better than having a Triple Crown on the line at Belmont Park and the Belmont Stakes. A couple of minor things changed since that conversation. I think even worse than having a horse lose the Triple Crown in the Belmont is having a horse not make it to the starting gate. With all due respect to Union Rags, it was really a very disappointing week there for most of us.
Yeah, I mean, it was basically pretty gut-wrenching, I would say, for that to happen the day before the race. You know, we had a couple of horses like 70 or 80 years ago who won the Derby and Preakness and didn't make the Belmont for whatever reason. But for this to happen the day before the race, just let the wind out of everyone's sails, pardon the cliche, but I mean, it really was gut-wrenching. And I just feel badly, most of all, for you know, Team O'Neill. You know, they've been so accommodating throughout the whole Triple Crown.
Yeah.
And especially, you know, Paul Redham, who we know personally and really like a lot. But, you know, it's just, I don't know what to say. I mean, we're not used to something happening like this. And you can say racing is cursed if you want to, and, you know, or maybe it's not meant to be until we get a horse with the perfect scenario, with no controversies, that's universally accepted by everyone, including the media and the outside media, and there's no controversies at all involved. But, you know, until then, we're just going to have to accept that these things are going to happen. We've seen it before way too many times, and just extremely, extremely disappointing.
Yeah, I think not having it happen on the racetrack even made it, you know, even less fulfilling. And I do want to pick up on what you said and talk about the incredible negativity and nastiness that was directed at the connections of I'll Have Another by media, both inside and outside horse racing, none of which was relevant to this horse as he progressed toward the Triple Crown. And I do want to cite jockey Mario Gutierrez, trainer Doug O'Neill, and owner Paul Redham, who all exhibited nothing but class, cooperation, and courtesy even throughout these attacks, and that could not have been easy on them. And even on one of the worst days of his life in racing, I'm sure, the day his horse scratched in the Belmont, Paul Redham came to our deli party in the grandstand, was gracious and funny as always, and I'm really proud of these connections and would have been proud if they had won the Triple Crown. I think they would have been deserving.
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate that it's not about the horse anymore. Sadly, the nature of our society now is to be cynical and try to dig up as much dirt as possible. I think the media went out of their way to make Doug O'Neill seem like John Dillinger.
Yeah.
You know, it got to be so out of hand. And they did the same thing with Mike Ivorone in 2008.
Yes.
You know, but, you know, if you go back to the last Triple Crown winner, no one in the media, the public, nobody paid any attention at all to the fact that a firm's owner had spent a year in federal prison.
Right.
You know, nobody cared. Nobody knew or cared that Billy Turner had an alcohol problem. It was all about Seattle Slew.
Right.
Back then, it was about the horse. It was about a firm. It was about Secretariat. It was about Seattle Slew. Now, it's not about the horse anymore. It's about the connections, and to try and dig up every little piece of dirt you could find about them just taints the whole picture.
Yeah, and really it's about the media trying to be self-aggrandizing and say, hey, look at me,
Right.
I'm doing this, I've got headlines now. You know, it's not about the media, it actually is about the horse. That's a great point, Steve. All right, let's go back to the Derby for a second. Steve, I want you to remember this moment because you won't hear these words very often. I congratulate Churchill Downs. That's right, I congratulate Churchill Downs. You heard it right, for changing up the qualifying system, for making the Kentucky Derby field by getting rid of the graded earnings system and going with a point system. I think Churchill succeeds in de-emphasizing races like the Delta Jackpot and Sunland Derby, which are fueled by slots money far above and beyond the quality of their fields. I think the new system weeds out horses that wins a race, you know, midway through their 2-year-old year and then goes sour but is still guaranteed a slot in the Derby. I'm not going to say Churchill got this 100% right because, for instance, not counting the Breeders' Cup Juvenile as one of the major prep races for the Derby is just an incredible error. I don't know how they came up with that, particularly this year when the Juvenile was such a key race. Steve, I actually don't know what you think of this new rating system, so what do you think?
Well, you know, I've been pushing for something like this over the years, and I applaud them for doing something. And I think, all in all, it's a pretty good system. But, I mean, nowadays, why can't anything be done without having a bonehead move attached to it? And what you said about the Breeders' Cup Juvenile and the Champagne and a race like the Norfolk Stakes as well. I mean, to have these races have the same amount of points as the Royal Lodge Stakes in England, I mean, what is that all about? It makes no sense. Again, I'm all for keeping the 2-year-old races down to lesser points, but you have to give priority to races like the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, which is the championship-making race, and a race like the Champagne Stakes. I mean, you can look at a scenario. Let's say a horse wins the Champagne and the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, and then he goes into his 3-year-old year. The trainer wants to give him a first start back in a sprint race, runs him in the Hutchison Stakes, 0 points for that. Then he decides, let's say he wants to run him in a race like the Wood Memorial or the Arkansas Derby. The horse stumbles at the start, gets into horrible trouble, winds up 5th, gets beat a length, closing at the end. He doesn't get in the Kentucky Derby, even though he's a 2-year-old champion, having won the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. Let's say a horse comes back at 3 and runs in the Illinois Derby.
Yeah.
0 points for the Illinois Derby?
Yeah.
You mean to say, tell me that the race like the Illinois Derby gets less points than the Royal Lodge Stakes in England, or the Delta Jackpot, or a number of the other 2-year-old races that are listed? I mean, how could it be the only prep race with 0 points? It could have nothing to do with the fact that Churchill Downs owns Arlington Park, which is a competitor to Hawthorne, is it? No, I'm sure that has absolutely nothing to do with it. You know, it's absurd and disgraceful. I mean, it's a slap in the face to a race like the Illinois Derby, which, by the way, has only produced a Kentucky Derby winner and a Kentucky Derby favorite in the past 10 years.
Yeah.
0 points. Who's going to want to run in it now? It's disgraceful.
Now I feel bad for congratulating Churchill Downs, Steve. But you're right. I mean, they said they studied this for a year and they poured over it. Well, you can't get that kind of stuff wrong. I think if you have a grade 1 for 2-year-olds happening, you know, in the latter part of the season, you know, it's pretty safe to say it's a significant race. I think what you need to de-emphasize is these grade 3s, no matter when they are. You know, if they're casino fueled, it's really not too fair. In the long run, I don't think this is going to affect a lot of horses. You know, if you win one of these prominent preps, you know, you were in the old system, you're going to be in the new system. I think it could help a horse who loses by a nose in one of these preps, or is third by a nose and a neck, you know, but is an improving horse and deserves a shot. You know, maybe it helps them to get in. Steve, we predicted that this year's Life at 10 story, in other words, the story that never ever gets resolved, would be Lasix, and I think we were right on that one. The Kentucky Horse Racing Commission this week banned Lasix in 2-year-old stakes races beginning in 2014. It's already causing a civil war in the state. So get this, Kentucky regulators already are backpedaling. They're saying that if no other state joins them in banning Lasix by 2014, they're going to reevaluate their decision. That's really having the courage of your convictions, folks. You think it's the right thing to do, but you're willing to dump it before you even get to try it. You know what? The Breeders' Cup has banned Lasix this year for 2-year-old races. So you can see how it goes in the Breeders' Cup for the next 2 years before you decide to cave in what you finally managed to pass. Steve?
Yeah, you know, I've got mixed feelings on this. I can understand why the Kentucky Commission, you know, wants to follow the Breeders' Cup format and do what they feel is, quote, you know, in best interest of racing. But they also, on the same hand, want to keep some kind of uniformity in racing, which the sport lacks. But again, like you mentioned, I don't understand exactly the reasoning behind this. Are they doing it for the good of racing? Are they doing it to make sure other tracks join in them? I mean, how strongly do they feel about it? That's the main question. I don't know how strongly they feel about it. I think what they're doing is probably the right thing, because they know that there's going to be a major uproar about this, and there's going to be a major battle, you know, between them and the horsemen.
Yeah.
And if they're willing to do it anyway, okay, if they want to stand by themselves and fight the horsemen, then I can understand and have a lot of respect for them. But to do it and say, well, okay, if the other tracks don't do it, we won't do it. Again, you can fault them for backing down on what they believe in, but also you have to understand that they want things to be uniform and they don't want to stand alone. So right now, I'm not quite sure how I feel about it, because I don't know how the Kentucky Commission feels about it.
Yeah, well, I think they should have the courage to go ahead and do it and see what happens. And everybody is crying wolf about the health of the horse and the health of the Kentucky racing circuit. Hey, guess what? The Kentucky racing circuit ain't doing too good right now. So, you know, maybe it could use a change into stand-up or something. Steve, this reminds me of the Three Stooges routine where they have to volunteer for something. And they asked to take a step forward, and Moe and Larry would always take a step backwards, and Curly, by standing still, would always volunteer, you know, for whatever dirty work was coming. That's kind of what this reminds me of.
Right. That's a good analogy. I like that.
The New York Times, which is crushing horse racing with its slanted statistics and biased writing in a pathetic attempt to win some journalism awards, came out with another editorial this week, dredging up more drug tales about the sport. They call high TCO2 levels doping horses. Hey, for the idiots at the New York Times, those aren't drugs in TCO2 overages, okay? Doping? I mean, what is this, Guys and Dolls era? Which, by the way, was the last time the Times was relevant. The major doping hurting the horse racing industry today are the dopes at the New York Times. Steve?
I think the key word you use is relevant. I think a lot of people just don't consider the Times relevant anymore. You know, for several years now that they've let their political views stand in the way of objective journalism, and the paper's been having its financial problems over the years, and even sold out by selling ads for their front page. That's how low that they stooped. The famous New York Times front page is selling ads. I think they're desperate for readers. They've resorted to sensationalistic journalism. So why even care? I refuse to read the paper anyway. And like I said, the paper's not relevant anymore, and they're just going to keep doing it in order to get readership.
You know, to say that you're doing this to try to clean up horse racing, when in fact you're doing it to try to win awards for yourself by throwing the sport under the bus, it is the worst kind of hypocrisy.
And selling, right, and selling papers. It has nothing to do with trying to, you know, protect the integrity of horse racing. Nothing at all to do with it. Because if they were, they would write some positive along the way. Yeah, just to balance it out. They don't write any positive stories. Everything they do is about racing is negative. So they don't care about the sport the rest of the year. So I mean, why even consider them a viable source of information?
Yeah, it's amazing to me that they still have a reputation where people go, oh, it's the New York Times. Yes, hell with it. All right, since neither Steve nor Stableboy will say a kind word about me, I want to congratulate myself for picking Painter to finish second in the Belmont Stakes, while they were picking a horse to win who didn't run in the race. You two, defend yourself.
It doesn't work. I don't think we need to defend ourselves. And look, I do congratulate you for picking Painter to finish second, and he did finish second.
After you derided my pick, right, 2 seconds
but I have
after it was out of my
wait a second.
lip.
I've got a question for you,
Yes.
okay?
Yes.
Of the 3 selections that we made,
Yes.
who had the only horse who lost?
That's funny. That's funny, but it won't work. I'm not taking that from you.
Lenny, your horse lost. Our horse did not lose.
Yes.
End of discussion.
The listeners who were wise enough to follow me went right to the windows to cash tickets, Steve.
Yeah, they got their $240 to place.
What did he pay to place? I don't even know.
I don't know.
Stable
whatever.
boy, open your mouth. What did you take away from the Belmont trip besides pastrami sandwiches?
As charming as New York is, I'm glad to be home and glad to be past this Triple Crown season.
You have to forgive Stable Boy. He's looking forward to the opening of Abe Lincoln Vampire Hunters this weekend, so he's a little distracted. We want to thank our viewers. We want to thank our sponsor, Darby Dan Farm. Let you know we will be back in 3 weeks on July 11th because of the holiday, so we'll let you shoot off your fireworks in peace. Happy 4th of July. I will see you a week after that. Steve, take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.